Every person in this room, regardless of who they are supporting for the Democratic nomination, is doing what is patriotic for our country. You are standing up and being involved in the political process. So thank you all. As many of you know, in the last number of months, I have had the privilege of traveling throughout our great country and meeting many, many thousands of Americans. And this is what I have learned. I have learned that from coast to coast, the American people are crying out for change, for real change. They are tired of the same old establishment politics, establishment economics, and establishment foreign policy. They want this country to move in a new direction. When in the last election, 63% of the American people didn't vote, when 80% of young people and low-income people didn't vote, when millions of people have given up on the political process, when there is a profound disgust across the political spectrum with a campaign finance system that allows millionaires and billionaires to buy elections, through their super PACs, now is not the time for establishment politics. Now is the time for a political revolution. What most people in our country understand is that we are living in a rigged economy where almost all of the new income and wealth generated is going to the top 1%, where Wall Street continues to dominate our economic and political life, where corporate profits are soaring at the same time as we have more people living in poverty than at almost any time in the modern history of America. When all of that is happening, now is not the time for establishment politics. Now is the time for a political revolution. When our foreign policy for the last many decades has failed the American people, has led to wars like the war in Iraq, which we never should have gotten into, now is not the time for more establishment foreign policy. We began this campaign 7 months ago. We had no organization, no money, very little national name recognition, and we're at 3% in the polls. Today, we have hundreds of thousands of volunteers in every state in this country, including some 5,600 here in New Hampshire. Today, without a super PAC, we have more than 800,000 individual contributors. And today, with your help, we can pull off one of the great political upsets in the history of our country. We have come a long way in 7 months. The people of this country want real change, and that is what this campaign is about. I am running for president because we live in the wealthiest nation in the history of the world, but that reality means very little to most Americans because In a rigged economy, the rich get much richer while almost everybody else gets poorer. The issue of wealth and income inequality is, in my view, the great moral issue of our time. It is the great economic issue of our time. It is the great political issue of our time. And together, this is an issue we will resolve. I am running for president. I am running for president because the great middle class of this country, once the envy of the world, has been disappearing for the last 40 years. Today, husbands and wives, single moms, and even grandparents are working longer hours for lower wages, and we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. I am running for president because we need an economy that works for working families, not just millionaires and billionaires. I am running for president because we need to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour over the next few years. We need pay equity for women workers. We need to pass the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act now in Congress. Paying $1.38 a week more is a good investment for families throughout this country who will receive 12 weeks of guaranteed paid family and medical leave. I am running for president because we need to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, invest $1 trillion in our roads and our bridges and our rail system, and create up to 13 million good-paying jobs. I am running for president because when youth unemployment and underemployment is at 30, 40, 50%, 51% for African American kids, we need to invest in jobs and education, not more jails and incarceration. We must not continue having more people in jail than any other country on earth. We need major reforms in a very broken criminal justice system. We need to stop the killing of unarmed African Americans by the police. We need to rethink the so-called war on drugs and take marijuana out of the Federal Controlled Substance Act. We need to treat substance abuse as a serious health issue, not a criminal issue. We need to understand that in New Hampshire and Vermont and across this country, we have a major crisis in opiate addiction, and we need a revolution in mental health treatment so that all people, regardless of their income, can get the help they need. I am running for president because 11 million undocumented people cannot continue living in the shadows. We need a comprehensive immigration reform program and a path toward citizenship. I am running for president because we must loudly and clearly tell the Republicans, no, we are not going to cut Social Security. We are not going to cut benefits for disabled veterans. We will expand those benefits by lifting the cap on taxable income. And by developing a new formulation to determine cost of living adjustments for Social Security. I am running for president because it is time that Wall Street, corporate America, and the billionaire class understand that they cannot have it all, that they are going to start paying their fair share of taxes. It makes no sense to me that every year we lose about $100 billion in tax revenue because large, profitable corporations stash their money in the Cayman Islands and in other tax havens. It makes no sense to me that corporations like Pfizer think they can leave this country and become a foreign company to avoid paying their fair share of taxes, while at the same time they charge us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. I am running for president because in a highly competitive global economy, we need to make certain that all of our young people who have the ability and the qualifications are able to get a college degree regardless of the income of their families. And that is why we are going to make public colleges and universities tuition-free. And while we make these public colleges and universities tuition-free, we are also going to substantially lower the interest rate on student debt. And you know how we're going to pay for it? We're going to pay for it on a tax on Wall Street speculation. I am running for president because, as a result of the disastrous Supreme Court decision in the Citizens United case, the American political system has become totally corrupted, and the foundations of American democracy are being undermined. In our great country, millionaires and billionaires should not be able to buy elections. And as president, I will fight to overturn Citizens United and move toward public funding of elections. And together we are going to end the voter suppression imposed by many Republican governors all over this country. In America, we should have one of the highest voter turnout rates of any country on earth, not one of the lowest. I am running for president because in these difficult times, against vitriolic Republican rhetoric, we must protect a woman's right to choose. And we must defend Planned Parenthood. And I know that I speak for every person in this room when we send our condolences to the families of those who were killed in Friday's attack at Planned Parenthood in Colorado. We must also fight to make certain that our gay brothers and sisters continue to have the right to marry. I am running for president because we must leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable for our kids and our grandchildren, and I have 3 grandchildren living right here in New Hampshire. Despite what many of my Republican colleagues think, climate change is real, it is caused by human activity, and it is already causing devastating problems in our country and throughout this earth. The United States must lead the world in combating climate change and transforming our energy system away from fossil fuels to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Republicans must start worrying about the planet that they will leave to their kids and their grandchildren and worry less about the campaign contributions they may lose from the Koch brothers and the fossil fuel industry. Because climate change is the greatest environmental challenge of our time, I opposed the Keystone Pipeline from day one. And that is why, right here in New Hampshire, I believe the Northeast Energy Direct Pipeline that would carry fracked natural gas for 400 miles through 17 communities is a bad idea and should be opposed. As everyone knows, we live in a difficult and dangerous world, and there are people out there who want to do us harm. As president, I will defend this country, but I will do it responsibly. We do not need a quote-unquote tough foreign policy. We need a smart foreign policy. As a member of Congress, I voted against the war in Iraq in 2002. And I will never forget that moment, because when you're dealing with votes that send young men and women into harm's way, those are votes you don't forget. And I listened during that period very carefully to what President Bush and Vice President Cheney and the others in the Bush administration were saying. Listened very carefully. And I didn't believe a word of it. And it gives me no joy, none whatsoever, to tell you that much of what I feared would happen in terms of the destabilization of that region did happen. Now today, we are confronted with a barbaric organization called ISIS, an organization which, in my view, must be destroyed. But I hope that we have learned some of the very painful lessons of the past. And that is, we cannot and should not attempt to do it alone. We cannot and should not be trapped in perpetual warfare in the Middle East year after year after year. We need, in my view, to put together a broad coalition, including the very strong participation of the Muslim countries in the region. While the U.S. and other Western nations have the strength of our militaries and political systems, the fight against ISIS is a struggle for the soul of Islam, and countering violent extremism and destroying ISIS must be done primarily by Muslim countries with the strong support of their global partners, the United States, the UK, France, Germany, Russia, Iran, and others. Now, interestingly, these same sentiments have been echoed by many in the Gulf region. Jordan's King Abdullah II said in a recent speech that terrorism is, quote, the greatest threat to our region, and, quote, and that Muslims must lead the fight against it. He noted that confronting extremism is both a regional and international responsibility, and that it is incumbent on Muslim nations and communities to confront those who seek to hijack their societies and generations with intolerance and violent ideology. And let me congratulate King Abdullah not only for his wise remarks, but also for the role that his small country is playing in attempting to address the horrific refugee crisis in the region. Now, what does all of this mean? Well, it means that in many cases, we must ask more from those in the region. While Jordan and Turkey and Egypt and Lebanon have accepted their responsibilities for taking in Syrian refugees, other countries in the region have done little or nothing. Equally important, and this is a point that must be made, it is a contentious point, and perhaps not everybody agrees with me. But in my view, countries in the region like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, countries of enormous wealth and resources, have contributed far too little in the fight against ISIS. And that must change. King Abdullah is absolutely right when he says that the Muslim nations must lead the fight against ISIS, and that includes some of the most wealthy and powerful nations in the region who, up to this point, have done far too little. Saudi Arabia has the third largest defense budget in the world. Yet instead of fighting ISIS, they have focused more on a campaign to oust Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen. Kuwait, a country whose ruling family was restored to power by United States troops after the first Gulf War, has been a well-known source of financing for ISIS and other violent extremists. It has been reported that Qatar will spend some $200 billion on the 2022 World Cup, including the construction of an enormous number of facilities to host that event. $200 billion to host a soccer event, yet very little to fight against ISIS. That must change. Wealthy and powerful Muslim nations in the region can no longer sit on the sidelines and expect the United States to do all of their work for them. As we develop a strongly coordinated effort, we need a commitment from these countries that the fight against ISIS takes precedence over the religious and ideological differences that hamper the kind of cooperation that we desperately need. Let me conclude my remarks by saying this. First, again, thank you to every person in this room for doing what too few Americans are doing, and that is protecting our democracy and getting involved in the political process. Thank you all. But let me also say this. Let me give you an important, a political reality that I think all of you understand. And that is Republicans win elections when voter turnout is low. That's a fact. Democrats win when voter turnout is high. Our job and what we try to do in public policy and in politics is to encourage more and more people to participate. Republicans sadly try to suppress the vote and make it harder for people to participate. Having said that, I believe if we are going to retain the White House and continue to build on the excellent work that President Obama and Vice President Biden have done, I believe that from the bottom of my heart, if we are going to succeed in doing that, if we are going to succeed in regaining the Senate, doing well in the House, winning governor's seats all over America, we need to have a campaign which is striking a nerve with working people, with young people, and with many of our citizens who have turned their backs on the political process. And I believe that that is the campaign that Bernie 2016 is creating. When I go to events all over this country and I see 5, 10, 20,000 people coming out, many of them people who have never gone to a political meeting in their lives, I see a future not just for my candidacy, but for the Democratic Party. When I see hundreds of thousands of people, again, many of whom have never been to a political meeting in their lives, sign up and want to get involved in the Bernie 2016 campaign, I see hope for the future of this country. So I believe that the campaign that we are running, a campaign which is generating an enormous amount of energy and excitement all across this country, is a campaign that not only retains the White House, but takes the Democratic Party a huge step forward into the future. We are running a campaign which calls for real change in America. We are running a campaign which calls for a political revolution. And tonight, I ask all of you to join in that revolution. Thank you.